As ALP members listened to the Premier unsuccessfully try to sell the plan, protesters gathered in Newcastle's Civic Park to voice their opposition to the $15 billion sell-off. The rally was held as part of the union's annual May Day march, and the privatisation plan was one of three themes, including the defeat of the Howard government and Indigenous rights. Pleased Yema's proposal was defeated, Gary Kennedy from Newcastle's Trades Hall Council is now hoping the Premier will accept the result of today's vote.
We expected it would be, but it is exceptionally good news that it's come through that it has been defeated, and we now expect the Premier to show some leadership and walk away from this ridiculous idea.
Mr Kennedy says the council will pressure the member for Maitland, Frank Terenzini, and the member for Newcastle, Jodie McKay, to also respect the democratic process and drop their support for the plan. If the Premier pushes ahead with the sell-off, the Trades Hall Council will protest at the party's cabinet meeting in Newcastle on May 27.
We'll certainly be up there with a very, very large walking committee.
Lauren Bladwell, NBN News. Police believe two male drivers became involved in an argument at around 11 o'clock this morning before stopping their vehicles on the side of the Pacific Highway.
During this, a knife has been produced and one of the drivers received a laceration to his arm.
Two witnesses assisted the victim to a nearby medical centre where an ambulance was called. He was taken to John Hunter Hospital in a stable condition. Police say it's still unknown if either driver got out of their car or what they were arguing about. A crime scene was established and forensic police were on the scene for most of the day. Police have spoken to witnesses but are appealing for anyone else who saw the incident to contact Charlestown Police or Crime Stoppers. Lauren Bladwell, NBN News.
A picture-perfect day at Anna Bay and 1 Mile Beach was the starting point for the 750 triathletes representing their clubs. The first wave sent on their way by Liberal frontbencher Tony Abbott. Wave after wave they followed in a range of age groups, with Mr Abbott later joining the fray himself.
When I was the Health Minister, I agreed to become patron of Triathlon New South Wales, and here I am. They finally wrote me into some patronly duties.
It's a different story for clubs who were chasing either the provincial or metropolitan titles up for grabs. An overall point score is the real prize at the end of the day, and tactics play a big part in that.
Some of the clubs are very adept at knowing the strategy involved on how to get the maximum points. Some aren't. Some of them take it enormously seriously, and we work very hard to keep it all in the spirit of fun.
Sydney's Chris Kemp was doing his bit for Bondi club the Brats. After clearing out on the 30-kilometre cycle leg, his lead only grew on the 8K run for home as he crossed in just over 1 hour and 28 minutes to claim line honours in the under 30 years division.
I'm heading overseas in a couple of weeks to South Korea and to race over there, so still hard training for me.
Balmoral's Sophia Amor-Smith was one of the standout female competitors as the domestic season draws to a close.
It's a bit like Where's Wally for Port Stephens. More than 80 volunteers dotted around the bay and 15 boats on the water, all trying to track one of the region's tourist icons.
It's hard to compare year to year, but over the long term, it'll give us a trend of the population.
Today was the 8th census and the first for local father and daughter team Brett and Emma.
Tourism and the dolphin watch industry and that sort of thing is extremely important for the bay.
While Sydney-sider Jeff Wong has taken part in 4 surveys.
I use it as an excuse to come up to sort of enjoy Port Stephens.
But the dolphins must have been camera shy, not one surfaced when we were looking. The half-hour census normally tallies about 110 dolphins, but it's thought the murky water from the recent rain might have pushed many of the pods out to sea. Penny Evans, NBN News. Over the last 25 years, Tocal Field Days have always tried to keep the hunters' farmers up to date with the latest technology. These days, it's also about keeping the city up to date with the bush.
Probably about 15% of the people who become full-time commercial farmers, but another 30-40% are people who are taking up a small block or something like that. Then there's other ones that are dreaming about it.
More than 25,000 people flocked to the college over the last 3 days, including some of our future volunteers. If you haven't got a big backyard but still want that rural feel, buy smaller cattle or match your young cowboy to the stock. And forget thoroughbreds, these are the new gallopers, well at least trotters. Penny Evans, NBN News.
12 months ago, he was a teenager stuck in the media headlights and thrust into state of origin. It's a different story this time around, and Jared Mullen doesn't mind a bit.
It's a great feeling, actually. They're talking about everyone else, so I could maybe sneak under the radar there. But thought the halves in City Country went really well, and I think they'll pick the halfback for State of Origin out of them too, or see how Gids goes on Friday night.
It was last night that Newcastle stood up to what the ladder leaders had to throw at them. Without captain Danny Medeiros, Newcastle withstood plenty, especially late in the game.
In the past couple of years, I think, not being too critical, but I thought, probably would have laid down, when they started coming back. But credit to the boys, we really stuck in there.
Really whacking them, which was good to see actually on the sidelines. A little bit of a miss. I wasn't part of it at the start of the game.
Ben Cross will enjoy some days off this week after backing up from the country match to play the Titans. Next Monday, he'll be in Melbourne against his former club.
I think regardless of where Melbourne are on the ladder, for what they've shown the last 2 years, they are the benchmark.
Tomorrow night, more on that interview with Ben Cross, including his battle for a Blues Origin spot.
Premier Yema is in uncharted waters. He's now defying his party's rank and file by sailing ahead with his power privatisation plan.
They see it as a travesty of justice. They just do not see that democracy is being properly served.
Among the 702 ALP members who voted to oppose selling off the electricity assets was Swansea MP Robert Coombs. Just 107 backed Yema.
I've got a philosophical view that government should be in charge of essential infrastructure, essential utilities.
Mr Coombs also argues that his constituents are concerned about electricity price increases and job losses, particularly given two power stations, Vales Point and Lake Munmora, are in his electorate. Meanwhile, the Hunter Business Chamber, along with local MPs Jodie McKay and Frank Terenzini, are standing by the Premier. They believe the government needs the money from the sale for vital infrastructure and services.
Business can do the job better. We refute the claims by the New South Wales Union Movement that this will lead to increased prices. There's plenty of evidence shown in other states that privatisation doesn't lead to increases in the cost of electricity.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News. In June last year, hundreds of Hunter streets were lined with piles of damaged goods, including photographs and precious possessions beyond repair. It was heartbreaking for those affected, and while many have since moved home and rebuilt their lives, photos and heirlooms can never be replaced.
People hopefully are through the trauma of the flooding, and we hope that most people are through the hassles with insurance, etc. And they're now thinking, what do I do about the photos of my school days or the photos of grandma?
That's prompted the Newcastle Alliance to organise 2 free community forums this Friday and next, with one session focusing on recovering photos.
We're going to try and put these people in contact with experts that can tell them how they can be conserved or copied.
Participants will also be encouraged to exchange their personal stories.
We're going to have another session where people will be invited to share their memories and their stories of the storms, hopefully in a written form that we can then put into an exhibition later in the year.
The organisers believe putting pen to paper will ensure the experiences of the 2007 flood will never be forgotten.
Memories are very important to people, and rather than just throwing the memories away, this may be just a way of helping them save them.
Bill Shorten spent the morning listening to the concerns of local carers and disability support workers as part of a national tour seeking to make it easier for people living with disabilities to get a job and keep it. He also took time to visit the House with No Steps to see the types of employment initiatives operating in the Hunter.
We could solve a lot of the labour shortages in the Hunter region if we could get more employers, including the government, to give people with impairment a fair go.
The message from the workers: try a day in our shoes.
We put a good day's work in for what we're able to accomplish being disability people.
It's very important that they know what we can do.
It's good to see them here,
Bill Shorten says the government is determined to wipe out discrimination against people with disabilities in the workforce.
We've got to change community attitudes.
And hopefully out of a message from today, I hope they get more people like us employed in the future.
A national mental health and disability employment strategy will be released by the end of the year. Penny Evans, NBN News.
Dressed for battle and still bearing the scars of his latest skirmish, it's on Friday night Kurt Gidley will get to taste what league used to be like on the famous SCG.
I've never played here myself, and obviously it's a great ground. I've come here to watch the cricket and that sort of thing, but to play in this 100th game and to know about the history of it, it's something pretty special.
Debuting last year, it's selection this time around which makes Gidley feel like a true Australian representative. A shoe-in come Origin time in a few weeks, the question remains at what position. That answer can wait as far as he's concerned.
Oh, it's not even in my mind actually at the moment. This Friday night, that's what I'm worried about at the moment, and coming off the bench and making an impact off the bench, and then after that it'll be the Melbourne game.
That game comes 3 days after the Test match, where teammates this week turn into opposition, and Gidley isn't even considering missing that encounter.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's the challenge, for myself, that sort of thing, and the challenge for most players about backing up for their club team. That's something I want to be involved in.
Jim Callanan, NBN News. At the start of the season, Ben Cross put State of Origin selection firmly on his to-do list this year, but admits as time draws closer, he's trying not to think about it. After 2 games in 2 days, he's enjoying a few off this week before the chance to impress his old coach and now Blues mentor Craig Bellamy firsthand in Melbourne.
A few players have sort of buckled under that pressure and playing in front of Craig, knowing that there's rep jerseys up and that available. So, yeah, as long as I have a solid game and just do my job effectively well, I'll be happy.
Having missed the first 5 weeks with injury, Cross has taken little time to make his mark, with Origin a genuine possibility.
Can't start dwelling on that and then forget about the night, so I'll just be concentrating on that. And if my football's good enough and I do that enough, well then hopefully it'll be enough to get me over the line and get a Blues jersey.
As for beating Melbourne at home, Cross says knowing how to do it is the only easy part of the plan.
There's no real secret, they just do everything really, really well, and they're a really disciplined side, so we just have to be the same.
With Danny Badiris returning, Steve Simpson and Adam McDougall could also make their returns from injury as well. It had been a preparation full of expectation for the expensive filly, which has the bloodlines to support such a view. By champion sire Redout's Choice, the $1.5 million buy missed a golden slipper start but remained on track for big things, and it came with a bob of the head against crack galloper Sebring on Saturday. Hugh Bowman guiding her home for the Group 1 victory, with trainer Chris Lees among those already eyeing greater prizes in the Melbourne Spring. In Newcastle Rugby League, there was plenty of feeling in the traditional East Lake Derby. Lakes United's first win of the season coming at no better time as they beat neighbours Central Charlestown to break their duck this season. It's next week's clash between Cessnock and West which will go a long way to sorting out the Newcastle representative team. Meanwhile, Western came closest to ending Broadmeadow's unbeaten start to the NBN football season, with Robbie Turnbull heading home a free kick in the first half. Peter Haynes found that magic touch for Broadmeadow, though, before the winner followed 10 minutes later.
There are so many excuses not to exercise. We're too busy, too tired, too old. None of them wash here. In this class, it's all about taking it at your own pace, all the while building a better body and a healthier heart.
Overall quality of life improves, they feel fitter, their doctors report that they're actually improving on things like blood pressure, cholesterol, strength and fitness and those sorts of measures, so we know that it is working.
Barry Tyndall started classes just over a year ago.
Doctor's orders basically, yeah, I was a bit overweight and lazy.
Hard to believe now as Baz busts a move.
I've lost a lot of weight and my diabetes is a lot better controlled and my blood pressure's a lot lower, so yeah, a lot of health benefits in it.
I just feel better. I think I'm moving better and I enjoy coming to the class. That's being out, seeing people.
Heart Moves has been rolled out across Australia and there's now even a DVD. The important thing, the Heart Foundation says, is to have a go.
If there's one message that we can try and achieve this during Heart Week is that every little bit helps.
The mother of four, who cannot be named, was due to be sentenced in Newcastle local court today after pleading guilty to dumping the body of her newborn baby boy in a vacant lot in Belmont last December. She previously told the court that she didn't know if her baby was dead or alive when she gave birth to him in a nearby hotel room and never looked at the infant before disposing of it. Today, the woman was surrounded by her family and friends in court and remained silent throughout proceedings. Her legal counsel, Lachlan Cumming, said the woman's pre-sentence report refers to remorse, grief and a very difficult set of circumstances, and that the case was a serious and unusual matter. He said his client had no previous criminal convictions and no drug or alcohol issues, and that she had been cooperative with police. He then asked what purpose a conviction would serve. While an interim cause of death has been established, Magistrate Michael Morahan said he wanted to wait for a result from the coroner's inquest before he handed down a sentence. The woman's bail was continued and the case adjourned to July 29. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
It's not quite like changing a washer on a tap, but when installed, these 18-tonne turbines will help save plenty of water and greenhouse gas emissions. The last of the 4 replacement generating units will be completed by June.
Well, we've had significant efficiency improvements to the effect that we'll save something like 400,000 tonne of coal burnt per year and the order of 750,000 tonnes of CO2 per year. And to date we've saved 1,500 megalitres of water.
$25 million has also been spent upgrading the control room as part of the overhaul, replacing technology up to 40 years old.
They are major expenses for a business like ours, but they are also giving us the benefit in improved performance as well.
The changes extend the life of the plant beyond 2030, although MacGen maintains a third plant will be needed to meet growing demand in New South Wales.
So it's a natural flow-on to build another unit at the back of Bayswater.
A major solar power trial at Liddell will also be completed by mid this year. Penny Evans, NBN News.
Like a scene from Batman, bright beams of light were shone skyward from the Cathedral Tower last night to launch the Hunter Innovation Festival. And while the Caped Crusader was a no-show, it did attract Engine Man and Computer Quote Man. Engine Man showed off his creation at today's Innovation Trade Fair in Newcastle. This is a normal car piston engine block, and this is Des Maslin's tiny engine of the same horsepower, made smaller because the crankshaft has been replaced by a cam plate.
That's allowed us to seal all of the lubricant off from the cylinder so that we don't burn oil with our fuel, and it's also allowed us to reduce the size of the engine significantly.
Computer Quote Man started life as a builder and has now developed a program to save builders time.
It's an estimating program for builders that they can cost out all their jobs in about an hour. Normally speaking, most builders would take about 8 to 10 hours to do a quote, and we've got it down now by clicking on pictures. You can actually cost your whole job in about an hour.
Several events are being held across the Hunter in the next 10 days, showcasing the region's innovative thinking in business and research. Paul Lobb, NBN News. Asthma usually strikes in childhood, and the debilitating symptoms can last a lifetime.
Tightness around the chest, very dry cough, can't breathe, breathe through your mouth all the time, and just feeling really unwell.
Now, a new strain known as non-eosinophilic asthma is the target of a 3-year investigation at the Hunter Medical Research Institute.
We now know that asthma is not all the same and that inflammation is different in different people. So now what we want to do is understand how it's different, and that will help us to better manage and better treat asthma for each person out in the community.
So this type of asthma accounts for up to half of asthma cases, and the current medications that are available aren't effective to treat this.
The project has been funded by a major coal company, part of a dusty industry that many have accused of adding to the woes of asthmatics for years.
The dust you can see is not the one that causes a problem as far as respiratory and asthma is concerned. But again, asthma is not well understood.
This new study hopes to change that. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
It was almost a case of 3 steps forward, 2 steps back for Steve Simpson today. He got through his first full training session but didn't get the required medical clearance from a knee injury. It could come on Friday, but no one's holding their breath.
I'd rather take the extra week just to be precaution, but if it's feeling good on Friday, I'm keen for a run.
The Blues and Kangaroo representative is doing well to hide the frustration of missing all but 11 minutes of football so far this season. The team's success his only consolation as he continues his bid to be fit.
Yeah, I'll have my moments, I suppose, a little bit of everything. Obviously, there's some frustration there at times, but you certainly can't let it get the better of you. You just got to get on with it and put your head down again and work hard, and eventually it'll come.
A worrying sign too, with Adam McDougall failing to complete today's training, but he says he'll be right for Monday. He's been named in the centres in a side that will also welcome back captain Danny Medeiros, but the extended bench is evidence the team is far from confirmed, with Kurt Gidley also yet to play in Friday night's test against the Kiwis. Jim Callanan, NBN News. Another good Newcastle crowd, but unfortunately this was the only court time that homegrown product Tiffany Lincoln saw. A battle for top spot, it was Melbourne who flew out of the blocks. When the Swifts found some rhythm and captain Catherine Cox, the results were good. But a slick Vixens held court and a solid lead for much of the opening exchanges, the margin out to 8 at one stage. Cox halving that by the main break as the Swifts dragged themselves back into it. The captain hitting just about everything she aimed at. But her Australian teammate Sherelle McMahon was just too quick for everyone. A minute before the last change and the home side finally drew level. Getting in front took even longer as the Swifts set up a frantic final term. There was desperation all across the court, with bodies falling as often as the lead changed hands. Crucial turnovers at the wrong time gave Melbourne one last shot. It was the Swifts left to rue their poor start.
Whitton Street residents woke to a series of explosions last night.
It looked like a war had broken out. Major fire down there, major fire here, and another one further down the street.
The fire, set by arsonists inside Greg Francis's boat at 3 a.m, was so intense it melted cladding from the walls of his home. A few houses down, Diane Borham's Toyota Camry was also destroyed.
My son and his partner, they've just had a baby Saturday. They don't drive, and so I'm their means of transport as well as my own.
Just around the corner in Mernon Street, another car and a caravan was set alight, while in Close Street, this Jeep was targeted. The total damage bill is estimated at tens of thousands of dollars.
It's just mindless, the damage that was done for no apparent reason.
The 2-hour arson spree began in the Wallsend Plaza car park at 1 a.m. when this car was set alight. Police arrested 3 teenage boys over the crimes early this morning.
All under 18, and they were brought back to the police station and have subsequently been spoken with, and they were released this morning.
No charges have been laid, and police are asking for witnesses to come forward. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
It was a landmark ruling that could very well have ramifications for other Australian cities struggling with alcohol-related crime. And while the lockout and early closing time for Newcastle's licensed premises has been lauded by the police and inner-city residents, it's loathed by the hotel industry. A group of hoteliers has launched an appeal against the Liquor Administration Board's decision. It will be mentioned by the end of the month. Now a coalition of residents and small business want part of their legal costs covered by Newcastle City Council.
We realise we're up against it in terms of legal costs, but that's why we have to fight hard to secure some money to match the resources of the liquor industry.
It's asking the cash-strapped council to provide $100,000.
Council doesn't have that sort of funding available for community groups or groups of that ilk.
I don't think the council should hand over $100,000 to any community group. This is the sort of thing that the council should be doing, showing leadership and acting on behalf of the community to get a good outcome.
The coalition of residents and business will raise the matter at the next council meeting.
I think council has to put a very fine perspective on this issue and think about what else we're spending money on and what are the competing needs for the whole community.
Jessica Phillis, NBN News.
It's been the hub of city life since the late 1920s, but Newcastle's flagship building is crumbling. City Hall is clad with sandstone and constant weathering has worn it out, and the steel pins anchoring the sandstone to the frame are rusting. The result is increasing numbers of dangerous missiles falling to the ground. The Lord Mayor picked up one on his way to work recently and says while the repairs won't be cheap, they must be done.
We cannot afford to not fix it. We've got to fix it. It's a very important building for the city. It's a cost that has to be faced, and we need to find a way to do it in a fashion that the building can be kept operating, I believe.
The other option is to close the building for more than a year. Councillor Aaron Buurman says the federal government should contribute.
The federal government chipped in for a part of Energy Australia. We were going to ask for money for the art gallery and substantially more than the repairs of the town hall.
If Peter Garrett says no to Nobbies, would you say to him, well, how about shelling out for town hall?
That crossed my mind. I mean, they're going to take away an economic driver if Nobbies doesn't go ahead. Maybe they'll help us with this one.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
The intricacies of being a council worker were put on display for careers advisors from 14 Lake Macquarie high schools today. The City Council hopes the advisors will now flag the idea of working for local government with their students.
Our statistics on our demographics show that we're losing more of our skills and knowledge sets as people retire.
Lake Macquarie Council hopes to replace the retiring workers with fresh blood before their workforce diminishes by offering traineeships.
We're looking at holding 7 positions starting in 2009, where we can actually try and encourage partnerships and better relationships with our young people.
The traineeships will be offered to Year 10 students and run over 2 years. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Two of the competition's early season frontrunners squared off, but at times the referee was the main attraction. This was a sight the crowd would get used to in the first half. Hamilton's Luke Briggs on target with the boot over and over again. Both sides found it hard to find the line as handling errors proved costly. In a spiteful contest, the referee sent several players for a spell. In the end, the boot of Tim Handley helped Easts grind out a win that keeps them on top of the competition ladder. Still on rugby, and these are the Hunter players named in the country women's squad following the country championships in Orange. Hunter won its 8th consecutive title, scoring 152 points in 4 matches. Country will play at the Southern Championships at Wagga in June before the national titles in July on the Gold Coast. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
These toddlers at a Newcastle childcare centre not only have leafy surrounds to play in, but have plenty of ways to learn about the environment. They grow their own veggies, harvest fertiliser from the worm farm, and use captured rainwater on the plants. And many of the ideas being implemented come from a new teaching manual written by local educator Rachel Kinsella. Early childhood teachers like Nicole Vesperman are putting the book's lessons to good use.
They're very open to it and they're very interested in nature and they really want to be involved in it. And when they're surrounded in a lovely environment like this, you can just see those connections happening from birth.
And it seems the program is growing some budding horticulturists like Angelina.
When we got the seeds, we plant them. We give them some water.
On March 14 this year, Milton Orkopoulos was found guilty of 28 child sex and drugs charges relating to crimes committed over 11 years from 1995. Today's sentencing proceedings heard of the lasting effect the abuses had on the lives of his 3 victims. In a statement read by his mother, one of the men, who's now 25, spoke of the heroin habit he'd developed after the then politician introduced him to the drug. Because I trusted him when he gave me drugs, I trusted his judgment and didn't second-guess anything. I've worked out I wasted at least $25,000 per year for 10 years on my drug habit and have wasted almost 14 years of my life. Another victim, 20-year-old Ben Blackburn, was targeted by Orkopoulos when the former member for Swansea chaperoned him on a visit to the ALP conference in Sydney. I felt betrayed that Milton used my great interest in politics and the Labor Party to groom me for acts of pedophilia, he said. As he walked past him in the dock, Mr Blackburn told Orkopoulos to burn in hell, you grub, and the prisoner responded with a smirk. Outside the court, the victim called for a full inquiry into the way the New South Wales Labor Party has handled the issue.
I feel that Milton was protected to an extent politically by the Australian Labor Party, and those involved should hang their head in shame.
Defence solicitor Peter Maiden drew attention to a report by forensic psychiatrist Dr Bruce Westmore, which suggested Orkopoulos suffered from a psychosexual disorder known as ego-dystonic homosexuality, and that if the prisoner were to receive appropriate psychiatric and psychologic treatment to assist him to come to terms with his sexuality, then his risk of offending would be significantly reduced. Judge Ralph Coulihan will hand down his sentence on May 21. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
The vicious assault occurred in Christie Street near Civic train station just after midnight. It's alleged Jay Gibbons punched an 18-year-old East Maitland man in the face, breaking his jaw, then stole his wallet.
It just seems to be a random attack. There was no rhyme or reason that we can identify at the moment.
Gibbons was arrested at Civic train station a short time later and charged with robbery with wounding after allegedly being identified through CCTV footage. It comes just 1 week after police announced a 33% drop in assault rates for April.
It's very disappointing in particular to have such a serious assault. It's the first serious one we've had for a little while now.
Gibbons has been refused bail and is due to appear in court on June 11. Ironically, today a safety audit was being undertaken throughout Newcastle's CBD as part of the New South Wales Premier's Crime Prevention Partnership.
Community members from a number of areas, businesses, council, residents, They're physically out there walking the locations with notepads and taking down descriptions of locations, what the issues are.
They're focusing on street lighting, public toilet facilities and public transport hubs, as well as derelict buildings and dark alleyways. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Our thirst for low-cost airfares will see 40% more travellers use Newcastle Airport this year compared to last year. That's 1.4 million passengers. And helping add to the increase is the first of several larger aircraft coming online with Brindabella Airlines. This is the first of 4 Jetstream 30-seaters that will replace the airline's existing 18-seat Metroliners.
As a company, we've gone from 8,000 passengers in our first year to 60,000 passengers this year, so it's a pretty good growth for 5 years.
Growth on the East Coast route has seen the Canberra-based airline establish its main hub in Newcastle.
We've actually got more pilots based in Newcastle than we have in Canberra, because we also operate that North Coast service through to Port Macquarie and Coffs Harbour and on to Brisbane, and that's gone really well for us.
And some of the larger carriers are also increasing capacity.
In terms of capacity, what we're seeing this year is with Jetstar's increasing by 18 flights a week, which is nearly 50% of more of what they're currently flying. And then we see on the smaller regional airlines such as Brindabella going from 19 seats to 30 seats. That's a significant percentage increase for those regional routes.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Stockland is already one of the biggest property developers in the region, and soon they'll have an even bigger presence, with news the company plans to build 2 more housing estates.
These projects will be focused on getting affordable product. That's a combination of looking at sizes of land, sizes of houses, finance products.
During a Property Council lunch in Newcastle, the company's CEO said the developments will be located at Aberglasslyn and Lochinvar, providing homes for up to 15,000 people. Apparently, there are a few key factors which make the Hunter an ideal location to sink hundreds of millions of investment dollars into.
Yeah, look, the Hunter has a really good growth outlook. There is strong employment base, strong population growth, stronger population movement into this region than into Sydney Basin.
Last weekend, Stockland's $500 million development at Murray's Beach was awarded the HIA Award for Residential Lifestyle Development.
It's in the early phases of its development, but to win that national award is a credit and really gives confidence to the people who are going to live there in the future.
And its plans for the $270 million expansion of Green Hills Shopping Centre went on public exhibition today. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Now retired from the University of Newcastle, Dr. Russell Jones still pulls on the lab coat to indulge in his passion for the platypus. He's part of a team of scientists from Australia and overseas who've now mapped the monotreme's genome, its genetic record over 160 million years.
It's giving us insights into what's happening in evolution of particular genes.
Dr. Jones's work has focused on reproductive features of the platypus. As our most distant mammalian relative, understandably, it's wired quite differently in the area of sperm development, for instance.
The sperm form bundles of about 100 sperm as they pass through the male ducts, and that enhances their motility.
Interesting, but also potentially useful in the human world when looking at issues like infertility.
There'll be individual genes that are important in that process, and now we've got a basis for looking at what was there to start with and what's there now.
The decoding of the platypus genome is by no means the end of this evolutionary tale. Researchers will continue their work with the enigmatic creature, hoping to learn more about us all.
He left Tomaree High 2 years ago, but most here still know who Craig Bird is.
You probably wouldn't get as recognised as you would in Melbourne, but yeah, it's not too bad. I like it how it is.
The Nelson Bay Junior, along with Swans teammate Eamon Buchanan, were there to spread the anti-smoking message, a campaign given a kick along by Aussie Rules, and a game giving rugby league a real shake at Tomaree.
Having someone like Craig now who's done what he's done and started playing senior footy for the Swans has really lifted profile here at school amongst the students and staff.
The 19-year-old spent many a lunchtime doing this, but school life wasn't lost on football. His former teachers say he was also an academic achiever and a credit to Tomaree High.
He had to be responsible for himself. He was provided with the work, but in the end it was up to Craig to make sure that he got the things done, as well as meeting his commitments for training and for games.
It all came to fruition this year when, in the AFL's opening round, Bird made his first top-grade appearance for the Swans. He's played every game since, exceeding expectations, presenting some new goals.
Now it's just to sort of maintain a regular spot in the senior team and maybe even get on the starting team. That'd be great. But yeah, obviously just to play every game for the rest of the year. That's my sort of goals now.
So far, so good. Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
It normally takes 6 people 2 days to harvest the 400 olive trees at Wilderness Grove. Thieves did it in the darkness of one night, taking every single fruit from the trees and the ground. The only 2 spared were those directly outside the guest house.
To happen overnight, 4 tonne in one night, without an olive on the tree, without an olive on the ground, is a fantastic exercise.
I still can't believe it, I guess, but having walked around the grove and seen that there's not an olive on a tree anywhere, I'm fascinated. I'd really like to know how it was done.
Wilderness Grove is one of at least 4 farms on Lovedale Road to be targeted, but it was by far the hardest hit. The thieves walked away with a haul worth an estimated $10,000.
I think it's upsetting that somebody's come in and taken advantage of our hard work over the last 12 months.
The other farms, including Sandilands Estate, lost between 500 kilograms and a tonne of fruit.
Once we heard that the other groves had been attacked, we decided to go and check ours. And a similar situation, where there was a lot of olives falling on the ground, everything was totally clean, trees and the ground, not an olive to be seen.
It's still unknown when the olives were taken, but it's believed it happened on either Wednesday or Thursday night of last week when the owners of Sandalwood were away and the guest house at Wilderness Grove was empty. Lauren Bladwell, NBN News.
The report from the government-appointed independent panel was kept under wraps for 5 months, but we can now reveal that it recommended a raft of changes to the 600-lot proposal. The report raised a range of concerns, including the size of buildings and visibility from the township, bushfire risk, the density of some homes and the lack of public access to beaches. But Rose Group says it has now changed its plan again to take those concerns into account. And with a hint of frustration, the boss says if the latest plan is knocked back, parts of the bay could be shut down. He says they could block public access to the beach south of the surf club, to the headland and the nearby Mooney Beach. And the second access road to the village at Montefiore Street would be closed at the Pacific Highway.
All of those areas, they're currently private land. The coal mine is going to be moving out shortly. They're almost finished their work. They'll be moving out. Then we'll have to look after it from a public liability insurance. We're only a small company, we can't do that. So potentially it could all be locked up.
Well, I really think that that is just bully boy tactics, because I seriously don't think that that could be possible at all.
The proposal remains in the hands of the Planning Minister. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Terms like top line, muscling and density were being thrown around by students as young as 8 as they tried to win a steer for their school, not to mention the title.
It's really good if you win.
Each of the 150 students assessed 4 steers, 4 heifers and 4 bulls, ranking them in order of their market suitability.
In the bulls you're looking for muscle and looking so they can breed on good calves, and in the heifers you look for femininity.
So it assists the teachers in teaching their beef component of their studies, and it just broadens their horizons basically on what the beef industry is looking for and what the market requirements are.
And for the moment at least, the local beef industry is looking strong, with hunter farmers now starting to see the rewards of this year's rain.
Locally, yeah, it looks quite good. There's plenty of feed out in the paddocks, and the cattle looking sort of shiny and fat.
Lauren Bladwell, NBN News.
The 2009 World Under-19 Championships sound a long way off, but this is actually the third camp so far for the Australian Gems. Usually based at the AIS in Canberra, it's a rare chance for Katie Ray Ebzery to show Australian teammates where she learnt to play the game. And tomorrow night, friends and family will also get to see as they take on the Newcastle Hunters.
Especially in Australian colours, maybe we'll see it, but no, it's a special thing.
Tomorrow night at the neighbouring International Paceway, it's the $20,000 Newcastle Derby, with Cessnock's Michael Formosa to prepare one of the best local chances, Staminator. Confident the mile-and-a-half journey will suit Staminator, they also have form on their side too, with a strong win at Newcastle last weekend. In Newcastle Rugby League, there are 2 games tomorrow, while on Sunday it's the top-of-the-table clash between Wests and Cessnock, which will settle the last of the representative jumpers. A rejuvenated Easts will be out to stretch their lead in the Newcastle and Hunter Rugby Union competition tomorrow against Wanderers. And it's 2 top 4 clashes that highlight NBN football this weekend, with 4th-placed Edgeworth against leaders Azuri tomorrow, while Hamilton and Broadmeadow will battle for second spot on Sunday. When Tim Bink eventually takes the foot off the accelerator down the track, it's his back-to-back Australian titles that he'll remember most. A week after bringing the national street stock title home for a second time, Bink couldn't help but reflect on the fact he can't actually race anywhere nearby.
Newcastle needs a motorsport facility. Like, I'm an Australian champion, I don't have a home track. The Pine Boys just retired recently. You know, they retired because we don't have a home track.
It won't stop him from gunning for a hat-trick, but it appears the off-season won't just be limited to the back shed and rebuilding his car for another assault, given certain promises have been made.
He told us last year that if he won, he'd have a baby, so we'll have to wait and see, and this time he's won it again, but nothing's been said, so...
And now I've won 2, so I hope it doesn't mean I've got to have 2 babies.
Whatever the outcome, it's shaping as an interesting time in the Bink household until next racing season. Jim Callanan, NBN News.